Hello, the Pioneer viewers. How are you doing? I hope you're healthy and well. We continue to bring you the developments regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. In a moment, we will bring you the latest developments on the front line with a map. According to the latest reports, the conflict zones between the Russian armed forces and the Ukrainian armed forces are active in 4 regions. On the Kherson front line, which has been acting for a long time, we can talk about the beginning of a relative calm. After the Ukrainian armed forces took a defensive posture, the Russian armed forces were greatly encouraged by this situation. Although the attacks on Ukrainian positions have increased intensely, the Ukrainian armed forces are responding with same intensity to the attacks of the Russian army. Although there are reports that the Ukrainian armed forces, which have made tactical retreats in some areas, have captured the positions from which they retreated again, we have not yet been able to confirm it. So what is the latest situation on the front line? Let's take a look at the developments together. As the Pioneer, we continue to bring the Russia-Ukraine war to your screens. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. You can also support me and my team by using the super thanks button below the video. Let's start if you are ready. The Pioneer reports. Let's make a change today and start from the northernmost front line. The Luhansk front line. We don't report here very often. This is because there is not much a change in the region, except routines of unchanging counter-clashes. However, we see that there has been a movement here in recent days. Yes, let's see the Luhansk front line on the map. In our previous reports, we have been briefly mentioned the Luhansk front line. We generally mention the forested areas around Dnipro. Clashes are usually concentrated in these areas. According to the latest reports, the fighting between the Ukrainian armed forces and the Russian armed forces is largely concentrated in the Shurbiansky forested area. However, the Ukrainian armed forces prevented the Russian troops from advancing during the clashes here. On the other hand, the Russian armed forces launched attacks on the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces near Sinkivka. Here, there is a tactical retreat of the Ukrainian troops. Russian troops are trying to increase their positions and dominance areas here, and they have succeeded in this to some extent. However, it should be noted that the Russian armed forces were able to seize these areas of dominance with the permission of the Ukrainian armed forces. Now let's continue our report by looking at the latest developments on the Bakhmut front line. As you know, the Russian armed forces have been carrying out offensive activities in this region for some time. However, when we look at the situation, we see that the Ukrainian armed forces have taken control. For several days, Ukrainian troops have been making tactical withdrawal here and increasing the security of their positions. According to the latest reports, the Ukrainian armed forces have completed the withdrawal operation here and the positions are now stable. According to the latest reports, the Russian armed forces launched an intensive offensive to reach the positions in Chasovy Yar, north of the Bakhmut city center, which is a stronghold of the Ukrainian armed forces. However, the Ukrainian armed forces successfully stopped this attack on the Russian armed forces. The Russian armed forces, which suffered heavy losses during the attacks, were forced to retreat. The Russian armed forces are also attempting to attack in the Khoromov and Bogdanivka regions. Previously, among the areas where the Ukrainian armed forces retreated on the Bakhmut front line, the largest retreat was experienced in this region. However, when we look at it, we see that the control is now established here. According to the latest reports, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to repel the attacks of the Russian armed forces in the direction of Khoromov and Bogdanivka. The Russian armed forces continue their operations north of Bakhmut city center as well as the south of Bakhmut city center. We have mentioned it many times before. The hilly areas around Klishchivka are very strategic. Thanks to these areas, the Ukrainian armed forces continue to defend the Klishchivka region. According to recent reports, the Russian armed forces again launched an attack around the Klishchivka region. However, these attacks also failed. The attack of the Russian armed forces were successfully repelled by the Ukrainian troops using the advantage of the dominant hills. The border line on the Bakhmut front line remains largely unchanged. Attempts by the Russian troops to advance are costly. Let's continue with the latest developments on the Donetsk front line. According to the latest reports, the Russian armed forces continued offensive operations near Novomykhailovka. The attacks were quite fierce. However, there are a large number of Ukrainian artillery units in the area. Ukrainian artillery played a critical role in repelling these attacks. Russian troops suffered heavy losses during the offensive of this area. However, they were not successful. In Marinka, the Russian armed forces advanced across the river in the northwestern outskirts and practically took control of the entire area. We have already mentioned in our previous reports that the Ukrainian armed forces made a tactical retreat here. We don't know yet. However, the Ukrainian armed forces may be preparing a trap because the Russian armed forces have advanced quite fast in the region. The fact that the Ukrainian armed forces have allowed a Russian advance at this speed is frankly confusing. We also see that the Russian forces are carrying out attacks in the direction of Ternikoy from the industrial zone southeast of the Avdiivka, from the coke factory in the northeast, from the Stepnoy and Berdyachi. It is possible to say that the Russian troops have made progress in the Stepnoy and Berdyachi areas. However, there are no other significant changes on the front line. To a large extent, the fortified Ukrainian positions continue to repel the attacks of the Russian troops. Now let us continue our report by looking at the latest developments on the Zaporizhia front line. According to the latest reports, the Russian armed forces seems to have seized the offensive initiative in the region. According to the latest reports, the attacks of the Russian armed forces to west of Robotny have increased. However, there has not yet been a border-changing development. The Ukrainian army continues to hold its position to a large extent. On the other hand, we see that the Russian armed forces are trying to carrying out offensive operations in the direction of Novoprokopivka and Novofedorivka in an attempt to destroy the bridgeheads of the Ukrainian armed forces. Despite all efforts, the Russian troops have not been able to make any progress in this area either. The Ukrainian army continues to maintain its positions to a large extent. On the Kherson front line, the situation is similar to the past days. Fighting continues in the direction of Krinky. However, since this region is a little calmer than the recent days, we end our report here. What do you think? Do you think the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to take a fully defensive position? Will the Russian troops be able to break through the Ukrainian defenses? What do you think about the interception of the Russian troops on the Bakhmut front line? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.